Let's see, here I am. Let me put my bass away that was live. And the name of this show, the title of the show is A Ball of Confusion. And so I have some notes. I hope people have enjoyed the Rufus. Well, actually, Rufus, I joined Rufus Cat last night with Jerry Cthulhu, but it was the Moose show that I did on what would that be, Thursday night. That was where I co-hosted. I was invited in last night by Rufus, but the show I had with Moose, I really enjoyed doing it. And Moose, if you watch this, thank you again, and all the wonderful people who joined us in the chat and then in the after the show chat. And then if I was invited in, I was actually watching the show with Rufus, and they had as their special guest Jerry Cthulhu, and next thing I know, he says check your inbox, and there was an invite, so I joined them and got to speak a little bit, and it was a really good experience. I enjoyed being with that panel. It was the first time I was with Rufus Cat, and I've been with Jerry a few times, and that's always great. Jerry is, I call him Saint Jerry because I consider him quite patient. Given that he will sometimes have large panels, all kinds of diverse opinions, and he really keeps pretty mellow. But one of the things that keeps on coming up, and one of the focuses for Moose, is community. And whether it's the community or just community in general, I think is something we want to keep a little bit of actually make the main focus. And one of the reasons why is because community, the conversation is about us. So much of the alternative community the discussion is not about us, it's about them. What are they doing, or what, more specifically often, what are they doing to us now? So there are issues of utility and issues of psychology, and to me psychology plays very much into issues of utility, because if we're not really in good shape, we're going to be of less utility to the community. And I'm quite sure anybody who thinks about community, we're thinking about a team, and everybody likes to bring their A game, or at least a B+ game. And we understand when there are those of us who have to be sidelined while they get back in, and it's up to for the community to support them. But there's a kind of like there's a convalescence time, and then there's a work time, and very often that's why you will have different departments or different teams. One might be, if you have a maintenance crew that goes out and is going to be building stuff, and then one of your maintenance crew gets ill, then they would go to the infirmary or the healing tent or whatever you have, or healing building. I'm very tent oriented. Just it's hard to get me out of the forest, even psychologically. So I really like being a part of these hangouts, these online communities, and all of these communities know each other and have usually been on each other's shows in one way. I mean, there's never, I would think, ever more than 1 degree of separation. And in the course of discussions, I see what I'm kind of framing the show in is a ball of confusion. And part of that is because the internet, you can follow any number of people as far as where do you get your information. Now, in the alternative community, a lot of the information isn't so news-based as it is, let's call it the search for knowledge oriented. And knowledge can there are different strains of what are knowledge. There's there's different some for some people knowledge and religion are synonymous. As far as community goes, definitions of religion, if we don't get into the actual etymology of the word, can will serve a larger spectrum of belief systems. Because I don't feel every belief system has to be called a religion. I think religion is a little more dogma based. And but as I get into the many conversations, and this includes I'm on, everybody knows I'm part of the One Truth Forum. I'm also with Global Mission of Peace for 2 years, and so I am kind of center stage for a lot of communities, and how very often I see people getting off track, or I should say distracted, by note comparing notes, but the notes have a certain attachment to them, attachment to our validity as who we are, and most importantly, how we are seen by others. One of the interesting things about being an Aspie is, one of the, if you know what Aspie means, that's Aspie is short for Asperger's. So one of the things that are supposedly wrong with Aspies is that they miss or don't follow social cues, and as that is seen as a liability for these people. That's what puts them on the autistic spectrum. That they miss social cues, like it's like they're saying something and they're not looking around to see whether or not everybody's agreeing with them, or if somebody's frowning. Like, in other words, is what I am saying acceptable? So apparently, from an Aspie point of view, speaking as an Aspie, the rest of the population that isn't in the autistic spectrum are the normies, the normals. And the normies, as I call myself an Aspie. I call the non-Aspies, non-autistic people, and I spell autism AWE, tism. But there is a certain kind of looking at each other to know, is this okay for me to say? And is what I'm saying not making me look like a fool? Like, in other words, will my ego survive saying what I want to say? And so I see often when we have groups together and they're sharing, let's say, their worldview, there is an attachment at a emotional and personality ego level. I mean, I like the word personality because that really is, in many cases, what the ego is. I'm not talking about egotistic. I'm just talking about that, the difference between, being centered in your meditative almost. I mean, when I meditate, I'm an androgyne. When I come into my body, I'm a male. So the ego, I have a male ego or personality. An Aspie ego. So it makes, when people are sharing ideas, because of this need to not look foolish, there's a certain defensiveness around ideas, and that's, I sometimes think, is not always conducive to just everybody throwing it out there, and then what do we want to look for? And for me, one of my, it's almost one of my dogmas, is what is of utility. And in this case, to kind of broaden that out, is what serves community. So, if so, I mean, some Sometimes I've even seen people get a little contentious over whether some group of beings comes from Lyra or Pleiades or whatever. And well, I heard this from this person, and I heard this from this person. My question is, okay, you heard that, and you can believe what you want, but how does coming from Lyra or Pleiades serve the community of us here on the planet, contending with a demonic government world system that sees us as monsters? I'll get into that a little bit. I kind of pulled up something that derives from dictionary and Black's Law and the rest of that stuff about when you a person see monster. So okay, so what is of utility? And to me, what is of utility is what serves community. And also, do we? And so, for me, one of the things, and one of the reasons I looked up I'm going to get into the legal definition is: do we understand the spell of legalism? Okay. Do we know what we don't know, and are we comfortable sometimes saying, I don't know that? Now, I actually hear most people are fairly good with that, but sometimes in certain situations where in one setting somebody might be more amenable, and in other situations they might feel more social pressure to not look the fool. Fortunately, Coyote is one of my major totems, and although Coyote is a teacher, it has that if you're Wile E. Coyote, you can get egg on your face. So looking the fool is something I never enjoy, but it's hardly deadly to my perception of myself. To understand at any time that I've made a fool of myself allows me to go, maybe we don't want to do that again, or oh well, that's being human and not being a monster. So do we know what we don't know? So and then even when it comes to things like free energy comes up a lot, even though none of us have it. Maybe they have it, but us don't have it. And it's really kind of interesting to think about that. Now, often one of the things that we are, here we are, communities about sharing. But if somebody does find an over unity or free energy, what do they usually want to do? They want to patent it. They want to make sure their intellectual property isn't stolen. In other words, we don't want to share, is really what it comes down to. There's money to be made with this. Do you know how much money I could make on this patent? That's if the military doesn't scoop it up, which it most likely will. And then I had a nice long discussion with a new acquaintance, and somebody who we've actually affirmed we are friends. Acquaintance is one thing. A friend to me is that's a harder definition, and harder by solid hard. Durable, endures. Like stating an intention of this is a friendship. There's a connection here. So he's somebody who's been involved with things. A civilian contractor, but because of his expertise, brains get scooped up. Knowledge and unusual ability gets scooped up very quickly, especially by a parasitic system that is largely has little talent other than using other people, managing other people. And it was really interesting because, again, this is the first time we were actually having a conversation. It went 3 hours. And when I mentioned the concept of patenting something, and of course we all know that that's a way to basically tell them what you have come up with. And I had not quite knowing the depth of his, I think I got a little sloppy, almost made a fool of myself maybe, because I know what I know. And I had said something about, if somebody, develops something in their basement, or garage, would be really nice to just kind of get it out there. And that was conceptual. I didn't realize who I was talking to. And which he said, "Oh, no, they have ways." And I went, "Oh, okay," which of course was a good kind of in a way for me by not assuming that I got good echo, good radar feedback on that this is somebody who gets it, understands part of the, let's call it the greater mysteries. So something you might, what it is basically from his perspective is if you turn one of these things on, they know. And I kind of knew that intuitively, but then I could also, what I'm realizing, and by this person confirming it, is that in basic, like in the tarot, you'll have the 4 elements. Okay, so it's water, fire, air, and earth. But in the more advanced systems, there are 5 elements. In Chinese medicine, those 5 elements are broken into the aforementioned 4, except air is called metal, but in tarot, air is swords. There's your metal. And then the ether, which is in Vedic medicine, is called wood. So now we're going to step back from the 5 and come back into Vedic medicine, where they do have the 5 elements with ether properly identified as ether, as one of the 5 elements. But they have it in what's known as the tri-dosha system, and where the 5 are put into 3 doshas, which are Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. Don't need to define them. You can look them up or read early Deepak Chopra books. The early Deepak Chopra books are the gold. The very first couple of books he wrote were absolute gold. And then he started writing novels and stuff, and he just basically became a corporation. I'm not saying he wrote anything bad, but I'm talking about the really good stuff was his first, 2, 3, or 4 books. And so what happens with them, we'll talk about them for a second, and one of the hurdles of somebody, let's say somebody who figures it out and wants to share it, the moment it turns on, now especially a zero energy device, what the zero energy device is doing is tapping into the ether. And Tesla understood this well. So basically, now the ether is limitless, but you're still drawing on it. So when you kind of draw on the ether, you're going to create kind of let's call it a puckering. Okay, maybe more like a vortex into your device, but let's call it a pucker. But you can see it as a spiral and understand that as a puckering of the medium that is the ether. And imagine the ether. The best way to imagine the ether is behaving somewhat like water, because we can see the effects of water. Air behaves like water in many ways also, but unless you add smoke or cloud to it, you don't see what it's doing. So that's why I'm going to say like water, because we're all kind of familiar with, how water has a balance and how it swirls, and to tap it will send a signal through it. So what's very clear now is that they, besides most likely having free energy, are also able to have, let's call them sensing devices, a form of radar, but a sensing device that is actually reading the ether. And so if somebody puts on a free energy device that draws from this, they get a signal. That's how developed their technology is. So, which is one of the reasons why getting very excited about free energy while they remain who they are, which is largely demonic psychopaths, largely, not to a person. But, and then also what I might want to do is also when I speak about something like government, or even if I speak about police, I am not talking about individuals. I'm talking about institutions. I'm talking about the bureaucracy, the non-human part of any of these names. So if I say, government, I'm not talking necessarily about a senator. I'm talking about it. I'm talking about that. First of all, it's a fiction as far as it's not human. But I just want to kind of get that clear because sometimes we throw things around. Like last night, there was some things about, some of the abuses, quote unquote, of the police. And now, when we speak to a community, somebody could be the son or daughter, father, mother, or spouse of a police officer. And I thought it was really important that we do that when we are speaking about institutions, we realize we're speaking about the bureaucracy, the thing, and not people. This is an important distinction for us to make psychologically and also to insert in our language. Because again, if we're going to, let's say we want police to actually be our allies, we better be real clear when we're talking about the police state or police being a problem. We're talking about the institution. We're not talking about individuals. Similarly, the military. Okay, people join the military and they get sent over and do a lot of things that perhaps would not be considered heroic, but it's the institution that's doing it. Yeah, their individuals have signed up and they get scooped up and become part of that system, but ultimately, unfortunately, the reason they're sometimes doing inhuman things is because this thing has taken them in and made a thing out of them. Now, of course, these people who were made things still have a sense of, hey, I'm a human. Yeah, you are. So, this is where discretion and some certain amount of parallel thinking is very useful. So let's get back to community. So we want to know what serves community. And I have one more bit of a note I wrote myself. The world's in the grip of demons and anti-human entities and forces. Their monsters are inverse to a human definition. So that's probably where I should probably call up my browser. I'll put this up. I really couldn't make this any bigger without losing it, so I have to go to my browser. But this is just a little bit when I'm talking about this anti-human stuff. So this is under the title of Human Being. And it's actually from I guess a Christian website. So it says, from Ballantyne's Law Dictionary, 1948 edition, human being is defined as follows. See monster. From the same dictionary, monster is defined a human being by birth, but in some part resembling a lower animal. And there's a lot of stuff here, but it kind of gets into what is known as the natural person. And especially since this is a Christian website, they're kind of promoting revelation, okay, as opposed to nature. So what we're dealing with through this whole legal system, and we'll let you imagine where legal system comes from. The word law is part of that, as opposed to way. That to follow nature, to allow nature to be your teacher, is to be like an animal. That is, a natural person is like an animal because the natural person means that they consider themselves part of nature, capital N, and also like in Mother Nature. So what we're seeing in this definition of legalism is that there is something that this tradition is anti-nature. And the only way that for you to be a human is you cannot really, if you basically what it comes down to, you either follow nature or you follow revelation. And it's not what nature reveals either. It's what specific personages have revealed. Again, I'm not going to do any overreach. I got some guidance, and the biggest caution was do not overreach. So I'm going to be a little bit cryptic. And but for me, a part of what I was hearing in many of my conversations is how much of a psychological implant the legal system is in how we apprehend the world. And to me, part of the toxic part of the legal system is it makes us, and it sees us as monsters. So therefore, were it not for their laws, we would be ripping each other apart. I disagree with that from the from the God part of my being. But anyway, so what's my point? Well, my point is to build community, to build a healthy community, we need healthy psychology. And so that is going to require us to understand what accretions have we picked up that actually could be impeding us in allowing ourselves to understand how we could be with each other naturally. Let's put it this way: if you're stuck in a cesspool, even though you get out, until you've properly showered, you still have shit on you. And so part of building a healthy community is looking at what shit might be stuck inside of us from growing up in centuries to even millennia of a system of legality that considers a nature-based human being and the legal definition as a monster. So, which is why I said the world is in the grip of demons, anti-human entities and forces or institutions. Their monsters are an inverse to a human definition. In other words, it's the monsters calling us monsters. And it makes perfect sense. I mean, it's an anti-world. So what is natural and human to the unnatural, those who, again, this is nature versus revelation. And so we can see that these are actually antipodes. So when one looks at the other, each one will see a monster. And so we all have kind of come out of these traditions. I mean, unless we came out of the woods, or more or less, there aren't many deep woods anymore. You have to kind of come out of the Amazonian jungle. Or maybe there's a few places left in Africa that are untouched. But we have not been natural for a very long time. In certain parts of the world, we're talking about we haven't been natural for thousands of years. In the Americas, the Native Americans were natural until the arrival of the Europeans. And actually, it was that definition. In this case, this is a Christian definition that was put out based on the law. And again, I'm not going to overreach and get into all of that. Vatican owning our souls, stuff like that. And deeper. But that was one of the reasons for why it was so easy for the Christians who supposedly, are representing one of the most loving beings ever sent to the earth, Jesus, could indulge in such savagery against the native people. And part of that was because these native people, or natural people, were monsters. And it's fine to kill monsters. I mean, read a fairy tale. A good ending is the monster gets killed. So let's get back to what is, my God, I went to 30 minutes already? Anyway, so what is of utility? And so I really feel that as we're getting together in community, And we all have our favorite subject, whether it's UFOs, ETs, free, what, pick a subject. Because with YouTube out there and the various speakers, the the subjects are endless. But what I guess what I'd ask is if suddenly we could all be given a grant of land and we could all meet together, what of that knowledge base would be of utility to us dressing ourselves, feeding ourselves, keeping ourselves warm, giving ourselves housing, and maybe even divorcing from the debt monetary system. Because once again, what does that money do? It buys labor. It buys the sweat and creativity of the monsters. Although, of course, if you belong to religion, I guess you're not a monster. Um, so I just feel that there is some discussions with ourselves personally, like discussions without any other people in the room, or talking to yourself. Know thyself. Um, that where we might start looking at what is important. Important is it the demonstration of how much knowledge we have, or how much wisdom we have? Because to me, wisdom is applied knowledge. It is knowledge of utility, and utility to the community. And I think that as we are starting to open up more and more live chats, hangouts, that what we might want to talk about is what would serve us if, I mean, just as a hypothetical. I mean, we're playing with lots of hypotheticals of where comes this, and is this, are we on a flat earth, are we on a round earth, or are we in a computer simulation, a hologram, is the sky we look at a fake sky, or is it real space? I mean, again, all blah, 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 blah. To me, if we're given a plot of land, a lot of that might not serve us. Certainly, how to build a shelter and how to grow food would be really important. I mean, people go, well, and I mentioned clothes, and people go, oh, I mean, don't you go to Kmart or look? I mean, again, that is depending on them. Go to a Renaissance. If you've ever been to a Renaissance fair, and very often you'll see somebody working a loom, and you'll see something nice like this. I don't think this was made on a loom, but if you've ever gone and examined that fabric, my God, it's that's like an heirloom piece of clothing. And so there are a lot of skills that would serve a community really well. I mean, again, it'd be nice if we can keep some of the system up and running, but man, it's a tangled web that has been woven. And unless we want to stay on the web, and we are not the spiders on this web, let me tell you that much. If we want to stay on that, if we want to get off that web, we're going to have to figure out some things. And it all starts with, to me, the kind of conversation we have when there's two or more people together, and what we choose to focus on. And I think I'll end it right there. I think that was about as much of a mouthful as I could put out tonight. And for those of you going, oh, I look forward to you playing your bass. Well, that was me playing the bass at the beginning of the show, and I'll get more going. But I figure, what the heck, I'll throw that in. And this was Ball of Confusion, and that is the bass line from the opening of the song Ball of Confusion, which was done, if I recall correctly, by the Temptations. So very good. Good line is that. Well, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Vote for me, and I'll set you free. Oh. I was even thinking about singing it and saying, a lie for a lie, a truth for a truth, or is a lie or truth. I was going to play with some words, and I figured then, but with my overreach, I decided, who knows? I might even offend somebody. Oh, let me just close with that one thing about offense. Hurt feelings. Somebody might say, I took offense with what you just said. I said, okay, I won't, all right, you took offense. I won't consider it theft, but you took offense. Offense was not given. And that's something we might want to look about sometimes when we feel offended, is did we take offense when it wasn't given? And this is, again, another way how in community, how we can interact with each other and not get triggered. And often, sometimes that triggering is because we took offense when it wasn't given. And the healthier we get with ourselves, the healthier we can be with each other, the more functional we'll be. And then that puckered anus that is called the all-seeing eye will pucker up real tight if we get our acts together. And I think we're doing that. I see it happening. I'm very encouraged. I'm loving taking a part in what's going on. And to me, what is sharing? And to me, the core of community is sharing. So that's it for me. And so stay sane. Stay in your heart as much as you can. And I'll see you next time.